champagne in Lila Ashford's glass had gone flat 20 minutes ago, but she held onto it like a talisman. The Blackwood estate wasn't just a mansion. It was a declaration of power, all granite and glass, perched on the cliffs overlooking the Aroostook River Valley. Outside, a winter storm was building, the kind that turned northern Maine into a white tomb. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of money, cedar smoke from the fireplace, roasted venison on silver platters, the cloying sweetness of imported roses that cost more than Lila's monthly rent. To the outside world, this was the annual winter gala for Blackwood Timber and Logistics, one of the largest forestry operations in the Northeast. Corporate executives in tailored suits, board members with handshakes that could crush bone, local politicians who smiled with too many teeth. But Lila knew the truth. She had archived it, cataloged it, buried it in encrypted files for 18 months. This wasn't just a company, it was a pack. And tonight was the changing of the guard. Lila stood in the shadow of a marble pillar trying to make herself smaller. At 22, she had perfected the art of invisibility. She wore a simple navy dress from Macy's clearance rack, the kind of thing that disappeared in a crowd. No jewelry except for a silver chain with a tiny sextant charm, a gift from her father before he died. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun. No makeup beyond mascara. She wasn't here to be noticed. She was here because the mate bond wouldn't let her stay away. Across the ballroom, Rowan Blackwood held court near the massive stone fireplace. He was the kind of man who made other men stand straighter. 6'2" with the build of someone who spent more time in the gym than behind a desk. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers. Sharp jaw, eyes the color of aged whiskey. Tonight, he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost $5,000, tailored to show off shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a timber empire. He was laughing at something a board member said, his head thrown back, confident and easy. The incoming CEO, the future alpha of the Northern Summit Pack. And according to the biological imperative that had tortured Lila for 3 years, he was her mate. The bond was a fishhook lodged beneath her sternum, pulling tight every time he moved. When he turned his head, she felt it in her chest. When he smiled at someone else, it burned. The scent of him, even from across a room packed with 200 people, cut through everything else. Rain on pine needles, wood smoke, something darker underneath like leather and gunpowder. It drove her wolf insane, scrabbling at the edges of her control, whining to be acknowledged. 3 years. She had waited 3 years ever since she turned 18, and the bond snapped into place like a bear trap. 3 years of watching him from the shadows of the archives, hoping he would feel it too. Hoping he would look at her the way alphas were supposed to look at their destined mates. He never did. He looks happy. The voice came from beside her, smooth and cold as creek ice. Lila stiffened. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. The scent of gardenias and old money announced Luna Margot Blackwood before she spoke. "He does, Luna Margot," Lila murmured, keeping her eyes down. Submission, always submission when addressing the pack's matriarch. Margot Blackwood was 54 and wore her age like armor. Diamonds at her throat, her wrists, her ears. Dressed by some designer Lila couldn't pronounce. Hair the color of spun silver, styled in a way that probably required 2 hours in a professional. She had the kind of beauty that came from money and maintenance, sharp angles, and cold eyes that missed nothing. "He's happy because he's securing his future." Margot continued, taking a delicate sip of champagne. "A real future, not a fairy tale." The words landed like slaps. Lila felt her face heat, but she didn't respond. What could she say? That she felt the bond, that she had been waiting. That was exactly the kind of pathetic desperation Margot was mocking. "You're a smart girl, Lila," Margot said, and now there was almost kindness in her voice. The kind of kindness that preceded a knife. "You keep excellent records. You're organized, efficient. Those are valuable traits in an employee." Employee, not pack member, not Omega. Employee. "But alphas don't marry archivists, dear." Margot's smile was perfectly pleasant, perfectly cruel. "They marry mergers." Before Lila could process the full weight of that statement, before she could even think of a response, the room began to quiet. Conversations died in ripples spreading out from the center. Lila looked up and saw Rowan stepping onto the raised dais at the far end of the ballroom, a crystal glass in one hand, a silver spoon in the other. He tapped them together. The sound rang out like a bell, clear and commanding. Every predator in the room turned to face him. "Thank you all for coming tonight." Rowan's voice carried effortlessly across the space. Deep, authoritative, the kind of voice that demanded attention and got it. "This is a significant moment for Blackwood Timber and for everyone in this room. We stand at the beginning of a new era. Lila's heart was hammering now. The bond pulled harder as if her wolf knew something terrible was coming. Our company has thrived for 3 generations, Rowan continued. But to secure our position for the next 3, we need to think bigger, bolder. We need partnerships that will carry us into the future. He paused, and the pause stretched just long enough to make everyone lean forward. That's why I'm proud to announce the unification of Blackwood Timber with the Sterling Corporation. The words hit Lila like a physical blow. Sterling Corporation. She knew that name, had filed reports about them. Sterling was based in Vermont, another timber operation, but bigger, more ruthless. There were rumors about Sterling, whispers about labor violations and environmental crimes that never quite made it to court. And there were other rumors too, the kind that didn't make it into official reports. The kind Lila had buried in encrypted files and sent to an anonymous contact over the last 18 months. Rowan extended his hand toward the side entrance. Please join me in welcoming Valentina Sterling. The woman who walked across that ballroom was a predator in designer heels. Tall, maybe 5'10", with platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. She wore a dress the color of fresh blood, cut to show exactly how dangerous she was. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. When she reached Rowan, she took his hand with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. And ahora, Rowan said, his voice not wavering even slightly, I'm pleased to announce my engagement to Valentina Sterling. She will be your Luna. The applause started immediately, a roar of approval from the assembled pack and corporate elite. The sound was deafening, a wall of noise that crashed over Lila like a wave. But Lila heard none of it. The bond within her didn't just break. It shattered, splintered into 1,000 pieces that tore through her chest like shrapnel. This wasn't the slow fade of an ignored connection. This was violent, physical. By announcing another mate publicly, by claiming someone else in front of witnesses, Rowan wasn't just rejecting Lila. He was severing the metaphysical tether that had connected them since she was 18. Her wolf screamed. Lila gasped, a sound lost in the applause. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered crystal, exploding into glittering fragments. The sound cut through the noise like a gunshot. Rowan's eyes snapped to her. For just a second, just one heartbeat, she saw something flicker across his face. Pain. The biological backlash of what he had just done. Even an alpha felt the rejection, felt the bond being torn away. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. Their eyes met across the distance, and then he turned his back. Valentina Sterling laughed, a high tinkling sound like breaking glass. She leaned in and kissed Rowan's cheek, her hand possessive on his arm. The crowd's approval grew louder. Lila couldn't breathe. The humiliation was a physical weight crushing her lungs. People were staring now, whispers spreading like wildfire. The archivist. She thought she had a chance. How pathetic. Look at that dress. Did she really think? Lila turned and ran. She pushed through the crowd, her vision blurring. She ignored the valet, ignored the coat check. She hit the heavy oak doors with both hands and burst out into the night. The cold slammed into her like a fist. The temperature had dropped to 15 below zero, and the wind carried the promise of worse to come. The blizzard was here, snow already falling in thick, heavy flakes that stung exposed skin. The Weather Service had called it a Category 3 storm. Dangerous, potentially deadly. Lila didn't care. Miss Ashford, one of the security guards, called out from the heated booth near the entrance. You can't go out there, the storm. She didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The pain in her chest was unbearable, like someone had reached into her ribcage and squeezed. The rejection sickness was setting in fast, her body's biological response to having the mate bond severed. Her internal temperature regulation was already failing. She could feel it, the way her hands shook, the way her vision kept trying to tunnel. She needed to run, needed to get away from the smell of rain and wood smoke, away from the sound of applause for another woman, away from the sight of Rowan's back turning on her. Lila shifted. The transformation was messy, painful. Her bones cracked and reshaped, wrong protesting. The navy dress tore as fur sprouted. She was a small wolf, russet-colored and lean, built for speed, not strength, not a fighter, a runner. She ran. The estate grounds disappeared behind her in seconds. She hit the tree line at a full sprint, snow flying up around her paws. The forest was a maze of white and black spruce trees, heavy with snow, their branches creaking in the wind. The ground was already buried under 8 inches of powder, and more was coming down so fast she could barely see 10 feet ahead. She ran anyway, east toward the deeper wilderness. away from roads and houses and people who would look at her with pity. The adrenaline carried her for the first 2 miles. Pure fight-or-flight response, her body dumping everything it had into her muscles. But adrenaline couldn't last forever, and northern Maine in winter was a merciless beast. The temperature was dropping, 30 below with the wind chill. Her paws began to go numb, the sensation fading from her toes, first creeping up her legs. The snow was deeper here, nearly to her belly, dragging at her with every step. Each breath burned in her lungs, the air so cold it felt like swallowing glass. And then the rejection sickness truly took hold. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was biological collapse. The mate bond wasn't just emotional or spiritual, it was physical, woven into the autonomic nervous system. When an alpha forcefully rejected an omega, especially in such a public, definitive way, it triggered a cascade of failures: temperature regulation, immune response, even basic motor control. Lila stumbled. She was near a ravine about 5 miles from the estate, maybe more. It was hard to tell in the whiteout conditions. The world had become a swirl of gray and white, the boundary between earth and sky erased. She tried to keep going, but her back legs weren't responding right. They dragged heavy and useless. She collapsed into a drift. The snow welcomed her cold and soft. It began to cover her, immediately burying her russet fur under a white shroud. She tried to stand, managed to get her front paws under her, but her hindquarters wouldn't cooperate. She fell again. This is it, she thought with this strange clarity. I die here, 5 miles from warmth, and he celebrates his engagement. The irony was almost funny. She had spent 3 years hoping, 3 years waiting for him to see her, to acknowledge what biology had decreed. And in the end, she would freeze to death in the woods while he drank champagne with his business arrangement bride. Her breathing slowed. The cold was seeping into her bones now, into her marrow. The shivering had stopped, which was worse. That meant hypothermia had progressed past the point where her body could fight it. The darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, soft and almost welcoming. Lila closed her eyes. She thought about her father, Dr. Nathan Ashford, professor of astrophysics at the University of Maine. He used to take her to the observatory on clear winter nights, show her the stars, teach her how to find true north when everything else was uncertain. He had died 88 years ago when she was 14. A car accident, they said. Single vehicle collision on black ice. But Lila had never believed that. Her father was too careful, too precise. And the week before he died, he had been trying to tell her something. Something about the stars and the satellites and data that didn't match up. Something about blackwood timber. Stars never lie, Lila, he had told her his last night alive. Governments do, corporations do, but stars always tell the truth. Remember that. She remembered, and lying in the snow dying, she thought, at least I tried. At least I didn't just accept their lies. Snap. The sound of a breaking branch cut through the howl of the wind. Close, maybe 10 feet away. Lila's ears twitched, but she couldn't lift her head. Was it Rowan? Had he felt the bond break and come after her? The thought sent a weak flutter through her chest, hope and desperation tangled together. A low, vibrating growl resonated through the ground beneath her cheek. That wasn't Rowan's growl. She knew his wolf had scented him 1,000 times in passing. This was deeper, more primal, ancient. She forced one eye open. Through the curtain of falling snow, a shape emerged, massive, easily twice the size of a normal timber wolf. Its fur was pitch black, so dark it seemed to absorb what little light existed. No brown or gray mixed in. Just black like a hole torn in the fabric of the storm. And its eyes. They weren't the usual yellow or amber of wolf eyes. They were electric blue, bright and piercing even in the blizzard. One eye, she realized. The left side of the wolf's face was scarred, the eye there clouded and blind. The black wolf approached slowly, each step deliberate. Predator's grace. It lowered its massive head, nostrils flaring as it scented her. Lila whined a sound of pure surrender. She was too weak to fight, too cold to run. If this wolf wanted to kill her, there was nothing she could do. The wolf didn't attack. Instead, it huffed a sound almost like frustration. It nudged her with its nose, trying to get her to stand. When she didn't move, couldn't move, the wolf let out a low rumble. And then it did something Lila's fading consciousness couldn't understand. The black wolf curled its body around hers. It was massive enough that it could completely encircle her small russet form. The wolf pressed its belly against her spine, its thick fur creating a barrier against the wind. It laid its heavy head over her neck, effectively burying her in warmth. The heat was staggering, like lying against a furnace. Lila's frozen muscles began to ache as blood flow returned, pins and needles shooting through her limbs. But it wasn't just body heat, there was something else. A low hum emanated from the wolf's chest, vibrating through her ribcage. Not quite a purr, something deeper, subsonic. It resonated in her bones and her failing heart like an external pacemaker. And it felt familiar. Not like the mate bond with Rowan, which had been sharp and demanding a hook that pulled and tore. This was different, steadier, like gravity, like true north on a compass, an anchor in the storm. Who are you? Lila tried to think the question, but her mind was fragmenting, consciousness slipping away. The black wolf tightened its grip as if it could feel her fading. The humming intensified. Lila felt the wolf's heartbeat against her spine, strong and rhythmic. Her own heart tried to match it, stuttering back into a more regular pattern. The last thing Lila thought before darkness took her was not about Rowan Blackwood. It was about stars, about her father, about the encrypted files she had been sending to an anonymous contact for 18 months. Files about illegal timber operations, about trucks crossing the border in the middle of the night, about women who disappeared and were marked down as voluntary transfers, about truth. The black wolf held her through the worst of the storm, through the night when the temperature dropped to 40 below and the wind tried to tear the forest apart. It didn't leave, didn't abandon her to the cold. When dawn broke gray and reluctant, the blizzard had buried the world under 3 feet of snow. The black wolf carefully extracted itself from the drift, shook off the powder, and gently gripped Lila's scruff in its massive jaws. It began to walk. 3 miles through chest-deep snow. 3 miles carrying a small russet wolf who would have died without intervention. The black wolf's breath came in steady clouds, its damaged leg dragging slightly, but it didn't stop, didn't rest. It carried her to a small cabin hidden deep in the forest, so remote it didn't appear on any map. The kind of place someone went when they wanted to disappear, or when they had been erased. The cabin was simple: log walls, a stone chimney, windows covered with heavy shutters. But inside it was warm. A cast iron stove in the corner, a bed with a handmade quilt, shelves lined with books, and something else. Something that would have looked out of place if anyone had been there to see it. Radio equipment, sophisticated and expensive. The kind used for long-range encrypted communications. Maps covering one wall, topographical surveys of the border region, satellite images, routes marked in red ink, and a laptop, its screen dark but the power light blinking. Waiting. The black wolf pushed through the door, which wasn't locked. It carried Lila to the bed and gently laid her down. She was still in wolf form, still unconscious, but breathing. Alive. The wolf shifted. The transformation was smoother than Lila's panicked shift had been, but no less dramatic. Bones restructured, fur receded. The massive black wolf became a man. Tall, easily 6'4", with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. Black hair shaggy and overdue for a cut. A heavy beard flecked with gray, despite him being only 35. And scars. The left side of his face was a roadmap of violence. A jagged scar ran from his temple, cutting through where his left eyebrow should have been, down across his cheekbone to his jaw. The eye on that side was clouded blind. More scars crossed his torso, some old and silver, some newer and still pink. His left leg bore the worst damage, an old bullet wound poorly healed. It gave him a pronounced limp when he walked. This was a man who had survived something terrible. He moved with efficiency born of practice, pulling a heavy flannel shirt from a hook and wrapping it around Lila's still shifted form. He built up the fire in the stove, the cast iron pinging as it heated. He filled a kettle with water from a pump in the corner and set it to boil. Only then did he allow himself to look at her, really look at her. She was so small. Even for an omega, she was delicate, russet fur matted with melted snow, ribs showing too clearly beneath her coat. Underfed, overworked, the kind of wolf the pack used and ignored. He knew the type, had been one himself once. The man pulled a wooden chair up beside the bed and sat down heavily. His leg ached in the cold of the old wound protesting. He reached out and carefully checked Lila's pulse. It was there, weak but steady. Her breathing was shallow but regular. She would live. The kettle whistled. He stood, limped to the stove, and prepared bone broth from a jar of stock he had simmering. Added herbs from the bundles hanging from the rafters. Sage. Thyme. Something that looked like it might be medicinal. He brought the mug back to the bedside and waited. It took another hour before Lila began to stir. The shift back to human happened slowly, her body too exhausted to fight it. Fur receded, bones reshaped. She gasped as consciousness returned, her eyes flying open. The man didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. Lila's gaze darted around the room, panic clear in her hazel eyes. She scrambled backward until her back hit the log wall headboard, pulling the flannel shirt tight around herself. Easy, the man said, his voice rough from disuse, like gravel in a bucket. You're safe. You're still thawing out. Who are you? Lila's voice cracked her throat raw. Where am I? You're in a cabin about 8 miles north of the Blackwood estate, he said, gesturing to the mug on the small table beside the bed. Drink. It's bone broth. It'll help with the shock. Lila stared at him, then at the mug, then back at him. Her eyes tracked the scars on his face, the way he favored his left leg, the careful distance he maintained. The wolf, she whispered. You're the Black Wolf. He didn't confirm or deny, just held out the mug. Lila's hands shook as she reached for it. The warmth of the ceramic was almost painful against her frozen fingers. She brought it to her lips and sipped. The broth was rich, salty, with an undertone of herbs that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. It slid down her throat like liquid warmth, and she felt her body respond, her wolf settling slightly. Who are you? She asked again, stronger this time. The man pulled the chair backward and straddled it, arms crossed over the top. Those electric blue eyes, the one good one at least, studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. Does the name Theron Blackwood mean anything to you? He asked. Lila froze the mug halfway to her lips. Theron Blackwood, she knew that name, had filed the reports about him 10 years ago. The head of security for Blackwood Timber, who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Presumed dead. There had been a memorial service. His name was on a plaque in the main office. You're supposed to be dead, she breathed. I am dead, Theron said. Or I was. Turned out to be useful being a ghost. He stood up the chair, scraping against the wooden floor, walked to the window and pulled the shutter aside, slightly checking the storm. Snow was still coming down, but lighter now. They had maybe another 12 hours before it fully cleared. Why did you save me? Lila asked. Her mind was racing now, archivist instincts kicking in despite the shock. Theron Blackwood. Disappeared 10 years ago. Last seen investigating irregularities in the shipping manifests. Theron let the shutter fall back into place and turned to look at her. Because I don't like watching people die for nothing. That's not an answer. And because, he continued, a hint of something dark crossing his scarred face. You've been sending me files for 18 months. Very interesting files. About timber shipments that don't exist. About trucks crossing the border at 3 in the morning. About women listed as voluntary transfers who were never seen again. Lila's blood turned to ice. The anonymous contact, the encrypted drop site she had been using to leak information. The person she had trusted with evidence she couldn't take to the authorities because she didn't know who to trust. Archive Omega, Theron said quietly. That's what you call yourself, isn't it, in the headers of those encrypted files. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Theron moved back to the chair and sat down, his movements careful, controlled. I saw him reject you tonight. Rowan, I've been watching the estate for years, and tonight I watched through the windows. Saw him announce his engagement to Sterling. Saw you run. You were watching, Lila found her voice and it came out angry. You were just watching. I watch everything, Theron said. I've been watching that estate for 10 years, documenting, recording, building a case. And 18 months ago, someone inside started sending me the evidence I needed, but couldn't get myself. Someone smart enough to encrypt it properly. Someone who knew exactly what to look for. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That was you, wasn't it, Lila Ashford, age 22, digital archivist for Blackwood Timber, daughter of Dr. Nathan Ashford, professor of astrophysics at the University of Maine, deceased 8 years ago. Single vehicle collision on Route 11. Lila felt tears prick her eyes. Don't talk about my father. Your father didn't die in an accident, Theron said, and his voice was gentle now. Gentle in a way that made it worse. He was murdered because he found something in the satellite data. Something about illegal logging operations on federal land, and when he tried to report it, Blackwood had him eliminated. The mug slipped from Lila's hands. It hit the wooden floor and shattered broth splashing across the boards. Theron didn't move, just watched her process it. You're lying, Lila whispered, but even as she said it, she knew he wasn't. She had always known. Deep down beneath the official reports, in the sympathy cards, in the life insurance payout. She had known. I have the proof, Theron said quietly. He stood and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner, pulled out a folder, brought it back and set it on the bed beside her. Service records from the truck that ran him off the road. It was a Blackwood Timber vehicle, reported stolen that morning, found abandoned 2 days later, wiped clean. But I have photographs from before they cleaned it, Photographs of damage consistent with a deliberate sideswipe maneuver. Lila stared at the folder. She didn't open it. Couldn't. Why are you telling me this? Her voice was barely audible. Because you can't go back there, Lila, Theron said. If Rowan knows you're alive, if he knows you survived the rejection in the storm, you become a liability. A rejected mate who knows the pack history as well as you do, who has access to 18 months of archived evidence, you're a loose end. He wouldn't hurt me. He left you to freeze in a blizzard while he drank champagne with Valentina Sterling, Theron said brutally. Wake up. The mate bond blinded you. He's not a hero. He's a businessman, and you were a bad investment. Lila looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, at the scars that covered his face and body, at the blind eye, at the way he held himself like someone who expected attack from any direction. What happened to you, she asked. 10 years ago. What did they do? Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up and touched the scars on his face, tracing them with careful fingers. I found out what they were selling, he said finally, and when I tried to stop it, they put a bullet in my leg and left me in the woods to die. Just like they left you tonight. But you didn't die. No, Theron said. I didn't die. I crawled 5 miles to a hunting camp, spent 3 months recovering. And when I could walk again, I started watching, documenting, waiting for someone inside to be brave enough to help me prove it. He met her eyes, that one electric blue eye, intense and focused. That someone was you, Lila. For 18 months, you've been the bravest person in that organization. And tonight, they tried to kill you for it. Lila felt something shift inside her. The grief and humiliation from the rejection were still there, still raw. But beneath them, something else was kindling, something hot and bright. Anger. Tell me, she said, her voice steady now. Tell me everything. What are they selling? What's worth murdering my father for? What's worth all of this? Theron smiled, and it was a terrible expression on his scarred face. Not cruel, just satisfied. Like he had been waiting 10 years for someone to ask that question. Not what he said, who now? He walked to the wall of maps and tapped one with his finger. Routes marked in red ink, crossing points along the Canadian border. Blackwood timber is a front, Theron said. The real business is human trafficking. They use the logging trucks to transport victims across the border. Young women mostly, taken from vulnerable populations. Tribal lands, immigrant communities, runaways. They're listed as voluntary transfers in the corporate records. Relocated employees, but they're never seen again. Lila felt bile rise in her throat. That's not possible. I would have seen. You did see it, Theron interrupted. You just didn't know what you were looking at. Not at first. But 18 months ago, something changed. You started noticing patterns, started cross-referencing the timber shipment manifests with the employee transfer records, started seeing the discrepancies. He was right, she had started seeing them. Women who transferred to non-existent locations, trucks that logged 12-hour drives to mills that were only 4 hours away, GPS data that showed border crossings in the middle of the night. The Sterling merger, Lila said slowly, pieces clicking into place. It's not about timber at all, is it? No, Theron confirmed. Sterling operates routes through Vermont and New York. Blackwood controls Maine and New Hampshire. Together, they would have the entire Northeast corridor, 500 miles of unmonitored border access. They could move 100 people a month. More. Lila stood up, the flannel shirt falling to her knees. She walked to the maps, studying them with an archivist's eye. The routes Theron had marked matched the GPS anomalies she had been tracking. The crossing points corresponded to the areas where employee transfers clustered. How many, she asked quietly. In the last 10 years, that I can document 47 women. 47. The number hit Lila like a physical blow. 47 lives. 47 families who thought their daughters had just moved away for work. She turned to face Theron. Why didn't you go to the police, the FBI? Because I don't know who to trust, Theron said. Blackwood has been operating for 3 generations. They have connections everywhere. Local police, state patrol, some of the FBI field agents. I've spent 10 years trying to figure out who's clean, and in 10 years I found exactly one person I trust. Who? You, Theron said simply. Because you've been risking everything to get me the truth. Because you're smart enough to encrypt your files and brave enough to keep sending them even when it would have been safer to stop. Because your father died trying to expose them, and you've spent the last 8 years finishing what he started. Lila felt tears spill over hot on her cold cheeks. She wiped them away angrily. I didn't know. I didn't know about the trafficking. I thought it was just corporate fraud. Environmental crimes. I didn't know. You know now, Theron said gently. He limped over to her, maintaining that careful distance. And you have a choice to make. I can take you to the border tomorrow. Get you to Canada. You can disappear. Change your name. Start over. Be safe. Or, Theron said, and now there was steel in his voice. You can help me finish this. Help me expose them. Help me save the next 47 women. Help me make sure your father didn't die for nothing. Lila looked at the maps, at the routes, at the evidence of 10 years of careful documentation. She thought about her father teaching her to navigate by stars. She thought about the women on those trucks. She thought about Rowan Blackwood drinking champagne while people suffered. And she thought about herself. Lila Ashford, 22 years old, digital archivist, daughter of a murdered professor, rejected mate, invisible, or at least she had been. I have something you need, Lila said, meeting Theron's electric blue gaze. In my apartment, a hard drive. I've been backing up everything for 18 months. Every file, every discrepancy, every piece of evidence. It's encrypted, but I have the key. Theron went very still. Everything, everything, Lila confirmed. Employee records, GPS logs, financial transactions, email chains. I even have the architectural blueprints for the corporate headquarters, including the locations of every security camera and every blind spot. Why, Theron asked. Why risk keeping it all? Why not just send it to me and delete it? Lila smiled, and it was nothing like the invisible, submissive girl who had stood in the shadows at the gala. Because I'm an archivist, Theron. We don't delete history. We preserve it, even when it's ugly, especially when it's ugly. Theron studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he extended his hand. Partners. Lila looked at his hand, scarred, calloused. The hand of someone who had survived when he should have died. Someone who had spent 10 years alone fighting a battle no one else knew existed. Someone like her. She took his hand. His grip was warm, strong, careful not to squeeze too hard. Partners, she agreed. But we do this my way. I'm not just your source. I'm not just the girl you rescued. We're equals in this. I make the calls on strategy. You make the calls on security. Agreed. For the first time since she had met him, Theron Blackwood smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. Agreed, and he said, Welcome to the Resistance Archive, Omega. Outside, the blizzard was finally dying. The wind had dropped to a whisper. Snow still fell, but gently now, covering the evidence of the night's violence. By morning, the world would be clean and white and beautiful. But beneath that beauty, Lila knew there were bodies buried, secrets hidden, crimes unpunished. Not for much longer. She looked at Theron, at the maps, at the evidence of a decade of patient hunting. How long do we have, she asked, before they come looking for me? You ran into a Category 3 blizzard, Theron said. In the pack's eyes, you're already dead. They won't search until the storm clears. That gives us maybe 24 hours before someone notices you didn't turn up frozen in a drift. 24 hours, not much time. But Lila Ashford had spent 3 years being invisible. 3 years watching and waiting and preparing. She was done waiting. Then we'd better get started, she said. And in that small cabin 8 miles from the estate where she had been rejected and discarded, Lila Ashford began the work that would destroy an empire. The stars, she thought, remembering her father's words. They always tell the truth. Time to make sure everyone else heard it. The storm broke just after dawn, leaving the world wrapped in silence so complete it felt like the earth had stopped breathing. Lila stood at the cabin window, watching pale sunlight struggle through the cloud cover. 3 feet of snow had transformed the forest into something alien and beautiful. Every branch wore a coat of white. Every shadow had been erased. She had barely slept. Her body was exhausted, still recovering from hypothermia and rejection sickness, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flash drive in her apartment. 18 months of evidence. The key to everything. And her sister, Nessa. The thought of her younger sister still working at the Blackwood estate, still serving drinks to men who smiled with too many teeth, made Lila's chest tight. Nessa didn't know. She couldn't know. If she knew what Lila suspected, what Theron had confirmed, she would try to run. And running would get her killed. Or worse. You're thinking too loud. Theron's voice came from behind her. He was at the small stove making coffee from grounds that smelled like they had been there since before Lila was born. I can hear it from here. Lila turned. In daylight, Theron looked even more battered than he had last night. The scars on his face stood out stark against his pale skin. His left eye, the blind one, had a milky quality that suggested old damage. Silver poisoning, maybe. That would explain why it had never healed properly. He wore old jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing more scars on his forearms. Burn marks. Blade cuts. The topography of violence mapped onto skin. My sister works at the estate, Lila said quietly. Nessa, she's 25. Been there 3 years working in the hospitality division, serving at events, managing the guest quarters. Theron's hand stilled on the coffee pot. Hospitality division. Yes. Lila, he turned to face her fully. The women on the transfer lists, 70% of them came from hospitality. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Lila's feet. She gripped the window frame. No, Nessa's different. She's family. The Ashfords have worked for Blackwood for 2 generations. My grandmother was their housekeeper. My father consulted on their forestry surveys before they killed him, Theron finished gently. Because he became inconvenient. Because he knew too much. Lila's throat closed. She couldn't breathe. Theron crossed the room in 3 strides, his limp pronounced. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. Solid, real, anchoring. Listen to me, he said, his voice low and intense. We're going to get her out. But we need to be smart about it. If we spook them, if they think Nessa knows anything, they'll move her immediately. She'll disappear into the network before we can blink. How do you know? Lila's voice cracked. How do you know they're planning to take her? Theron limped back to the filing cabinet and pulled out another folder. This one was thicker, stuffed with printed photographs and documents. He brought it to the small table and spread the contents out. Transfer orders. 47 of them spanning 10 years. Each one with a photograph of a young woman attached. Smiling faces, official employee photos. And next to each photo, a second image. Security camera footage of the same women being loaded into trucks in the middle of the night. Some were crying, some were unconscious. None of them looked like they were going willingly. I've been documenting everything, Theron said. Every transfer, every disappearance. And 3 weeks ago, I intercepted a radio communication. Coded, but I've learned to decrypt their system. They're planning the next shipment, 23 days from now. And this, he pulled out a single sheet of paper, a transfer order dated for 3 weeks in the future. The name at the top made Lila's vision blur. Ashford Nessa Marie, age 25. Position hospitality coordinator. Destination Sterling Operations Burlington facility. Burlington doesn't have a facility, Lila whispered. I've archived every Sterling property. There's no Burlington facility. Exactly, Theron said. Burlington is a crossing point, from Vermont into Quebec. After that, the trail goes cold. I've never been able to track where they go after they cross the border. Lila's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table, staring at her sister's name. Nessa, baby sister with the bright laugh and the terrible taste in romance novels. Nessa, who still braided her hair the way their mother had taught them. Nessa, who brought Lila coffee every morning before the gala, who never forgot birthdays, who cried at wedding scenes in movies. 23 days, Lila said. We have 23 days to stop this. We have less than that, Theron corrected. We need to get to your apartment today. Get that hard drive. Then we need to figure out who we can trust to take this evidence. The FBI has a human trafficking task force, but I don't know which agents are clean. Lila's mind was already working, shifting through possibilities with the methodical precision that made her a good archivist. We need leverage, something so big they can't ignore it, something that forces their hand. The hard drive isn't enough, Lila interrupted. Digital evidence can be disputed, claimed as fabricated. We need physical proof. We need witnesses. We need to catch them in the act. Theron studied her, those electric blue eyes sharp. You want to wait until they try to move Nessa? I want to document the entire operation, Lila said, from the initial transfer order to the moment they try to cross the border. Video evidence, GPS tracking, the whole chain of custody, make it impossible to deny. That's insane. If anything goes wrong, my sister disappears forever. Lila cut him off, and so do 22 other women. This isn't just about Nessa. This is about all of them, and it's about making sure Rowan Blackwood and Valentina Sterling can never do this to anyone else. Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Lila didn't expect. He smiled, that same transformative expression that made the scars on his face look like battle honors instead of disfigurement. You're not what I expected, Archive Omega, he said. What did you expect? Someone more afraid, someone who would take the safe option. Lila thought about her father cold in the ground for 8 years. She thought about the women in those photographs, their smiling faces transformed into expressions of terror. She thought about Nessa's name on that transfer order. Fear is a luxury, she said quietly, and I stopped being able to afford it the day I realized my father's death wasn't an accident. Theron nodded slowly. All right, then we do this your way. But we're going to need help. I can't do this alone anymore. And neither can you. Who did you have in mind? Theron walked to the radio equipment in the corner. It looked like something out of a spy movie, all dials and frequencies and encrypted channels. He flipped a switch and the equipment hummed to life. I've been in contact with 3 people over the last 10 years, he said, adjusting the frequency. People who got out, people who have their own reasons to want Blackwood destroyed. If we're going to do this, we're going to need them. He picked up the microphone and spoke a series of numbers. A code. Then he waited. The response came 30 seconds later. A crackle of static, then a voice. Male older with the rough edge of someone who had smoked too many cigarettes. Ghost Actual, this is Shepard. Didn't expect to hear from you for another month. Shepard, we're accelerating the timeline, Theron said. I need you at the Northern Safe House. How soon can you be here? A pause. I'm in Bangor, 4 hours if the roads are clear. What happened? I'll brief you when you arrive. And Shepard, bring your medical kit. I have a guest who went through rejection sickness and hypothermia last night. Another pause longer this time. Copy that. I'm moving now. Theron switched frequencies and repeated the process. This time the voice that answered was female, younger with an edge of barely controlled anger. This is Reaper. Reaper, it's Ghost. Need you at Northern Safe House. Timeline is accelerated. About damn time. The satisfaction in the woman's voice was audible even through the static. I've been waiting 3 years for you to make a move. When do you need me? Today if possible. Tomorrow at the latest. I'll be there by nightfall. Reaper out. The third call took longer to connect. When it did, the voice was younger still. Male with the uncertain quality of someone who hadn't quite grown into adulthood. K. Frost here. Frost, it's Ghost. I need your skills. Northern Safe House. Can you make it? I'm in Portland, but Ghost, I'm on Blackwood's watch list. If I disappear, they'll know something's up. Can you fake a family emergency? Yeah, I can do that. Give me 6 hours. 6 hours. And Frost, bring everything, all your equipment. We're not coming back. The radio went silent. Theron switched it off and turned to face Lila. Shepard is Dr. Hayes Merrick, 64 years old, veterinarian. He patched me up 10 years ago when I should have died. Kept me alive through silver poisoning and infection. He's the closest thing I have to family. Lila nodded, filing away the information. And Reaper. Sloan Winters, 29, former police officer with the Maine State Police. Her sister was one of the 47, disappeared 5 years ago. Listed as a voluntary transfer to a Sterling facility in upstate New York. Sloan spent 2 years trying to find her through official channels. When that failed, she came to me. Did you find her sister? Theron's face went hard. We found her body 3 years ago, dumped in a ravine outside of Montreal. She'd been dead for 18 months. Lila felt something cold settle in her stomach. And K. Frost. Kieran Frost, 26, former IT specialist for Blackwood Timber. He stumbled across some of the transfer files 2 years ago, started asking questions. They were going to transfer him to a remote logging camp in Alaska. Permanent assignment. He ran instead. Came to me, been helping me decrypt their communications ever since. 3 people, a veterinarian, an ex-cop, and a hacker. It wasn't an army, but it was more than Lila had expected. Why now, she asked. You've been gathering evidence for 10 years. Why accelerate the timeline now? Theron looked at her, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Because for 10 years I've been doing this alone, documenting crimes I couldn't stop, watching women disappear and not being able to save them. I told myself I needed more evidence, more proof, that I had to be patient. He limped to the window and stared out at the snow-covered forest. But the truth is I was afraid that if I moved too soon they'd destroy the evidence, afraid that I'd get people killed, afraid that I wasn't enough. And now, Theron turned back to her. I have a partner, someone who's been inside the system, someone who has 18 months of evidence I don't, someone who's smart enough to encrypt her files and brave enough to keep sending them even when it would have been easier to look away. He crossed to her, maintaining that careful distance he always kept. You changed the equation, Lila. For the first time in 10 years, I'm not alone. And that makes all the difference. Lila felt something shift in her chest. Not the mate bond. That was gone, torn away by Rowan's public rejection. This was different. Cleaner. built on respect instead of biology, on choice instead of destiny. We're going to need a plan, she said, a real one, not just reacting. We need to think 3 steps ahead. Agreed, but first we need that hard drive. Lila glanced at the window. The sun was higher now, burning off the morning fog. The roads would still be treacherous but passable. My apartment is in Caribou, 23 miles from here. If we leave now, we can be there and back before dark. They'll be looking for your body, Theron warned. The storm is clearing. Search parties will be out. Then we don't take the roads, Lila said. She walked to the maps on the wall and studied them with the focus that had made her an excellent archivist. There, the old logging trail. It runs parallel to Route 161, but stays in the forest. It'll add an hour to the trip, but we'll avoid checkpoints. Theron looked at the map, then at her. You know the territory. My father used to take me hiking out here when I was a kid, before he started working for Blackwood. He taught me to navigate using topography and star positions. She touched the sextant charm at her throat. Said you never know when technology will fail. Always have a backup. Smart man. He was. Lila's throat tightened. He really was. They prepared in silence. Theron pulled out winter gear from a storage trunk, heavy parkas, insulated boots, snowshoes, everything well used but functional. He moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Lila watched him cataloging details, the way he favored his left leg, the care he took with his blind side, always positioning himself so his good eye had the wider field of view, the methodical check of supplies. This was a man who had survived on being prepared. Here, Theron handed her a parka. It was too big, but warm. And this, he held out a small handgun, compact, Glock 43, the kind designed for concealed carry. Lila stared at it. I don't know how to shoot. Point at what you want to hit, pull the trigger. But Lila, he waited until she met his eyes. This is just a last resort. If we're doing our job right, you'll never need to use it. She took the gun, feeling the weight of it. Heavier than she expected, more real. I've spent my whole life avoiding conflict, being invisible, not making waves. I know, Theron said gently, but invisible is over now. The moment you started sending me those files, you declared war. You just didn't know it yet. Lila checked the safety the way Theron showed her and tucked the gun into her parka pocket. Then I'd better learn how to fight. They left the cabin as the sun reached its zenith. The temperature had climbed to a balmy 10 degrees, which felt almost warm after the brutal cold of the previous night. The forest was pristine, unmarked, except for animal tracks. Rabbits, deer. A moose had passed through at some point, its massive hoof prints deep in the snow. Theron led the way, setting a steady pace that accommodated his limp. Lila followed her snowshoes, making soft crunching sounds with each step. The exertion felt good, burning away some of the residual cold and shock. They didn't talk much. Sound carried too far in the winter forest. But Lila found herself watching Theron move through the terrain. He navigated with the confidence of someone who knew every tree, every rise and fall. This was his territory, had been for 10 years, alone. The thought made her chest ache. 10 years in isolation. 10 years watching crimes he couldn't stop. 10 years waiting for someone to help him. After 2 hours, they stopped to rest. Theron pulled out a thermos of coffee and they shared it in silence, backs against a fallen spruce. What was she like? Layla asked quietly. Sloane's sister. Theron took a sip of coffee before answering. Maya Winters. 23 when she disappeared. She was working hospitality at the estate. Same as your sister. Bright kid. Wanted to save money for nursing school. How did Sloane find out what really happened? She didn't, not for a long time. The official story was that Maya had transferred to a Sterling facility in New York. Sloane called. Maya answered. Said she was fine. Happy. Making good money. But she wasn't. No, they had Maya for 2 weeks before they killed her. Made her call family once a week, read from a script, made it sound like everything was fine. By the time Sloane got suspicious enough to drive to New York, Maya had been dead for 3 months. Lila thought about Nessa, imagined her on a phone call reading from a script while men with guns stood just out of frame. We're not going to let that happen to Nessa. No, Theron agreed, we're not. They reached the outskirts of Caribou as the sun began its descent. Lila's apartment was in a converted farmhouse on the edge of town. 3 units, all occupied by people who worked odd hours and kept to themselves. Perfect for privacy. We'll approach from the back, Lila said. There's a tree line that runs up to the property. If anyone's watching, they'll be watching the front. They circled around using the forest as cover. Lila's unit was on the second floor, accessible by an external staircase. The snow on the stairs was undisturbed. No one had been here. Lila unlocked the door with hands that shook only slightly. The apartment was cold, the heat turned down to save money. Small, functional, books everywhere, star charts on the walls, a telescope by the window pointing at the sky. "You really are an astronomer," Theron said, looking at the charts. "Amateur. My father was the real scientist." Lila moved to her desk and booted up her laptop. "But he taught me the basics, how to calculate stellar positions, how to use them for navigation, how to recognize patterns." "And that's what you saw in the Blackwood files, patterns?" "Yes." Lila typed in her password and accessed the encrypted partition. 18 months ago, I was reorganizing the digital archives, creating a new indexing system. I started noticing discrepancies. Trucks logging more miles than their routes should require. Employee transfers that didn't match up with facility locations. Money moving through accounts that shouldn't exist. She pulled out a portable hard drive from a locked drawer. "I started backing up everything, not just the suspicious files. Everything. Emails, manifests, GPS logs, financial records, personnel files. If it existed in the Blackwood system, I copied it. That's incredibly dangerous." It was necessary. Lila connected the hard drive and began the transfer process. "I didn't know what I was looking for at first. Just knew something was wrong. It took 6 months before I started to see the real pattern. The women. The women," Lila confirmed. "All young, all from vulnerable backgrounds, all transferred through hospitality first. And all of them vanished. Not on social media anymore. Phone numbers disconnected. Families hadn't heard from them in months." The transfer completed. Lila ejected the drive and tucked it into her inner parka pocket. "I didn't know who to trust. Couldn't go to the PAC. Couldn't go to the company. Couldn't even go to the police because I didn't know who was involved." "So you found me." "I found whispers," Lila corrected, "on dark web forums, stories about a ghost who was hunting Blackwood, someone who had been inside, someone who knew the truth. I left a message. You responded, and for 18 months we've been building this case together." She turned to face him. "You were never alone, Theron. Not really. I've been with you, fighting the same fight." Something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of shared purpose. Theron cleared his throat. "We should get back before..." The sound of tires crunching on snow cut him off. Both of them froze. Lila moved to the window and carefully pulled the curtain aside a fraction of an inch. 2 SUVs, Blackwood corporate vehicles. 4 men getting out. Security uniforms. "They're here," she whispered. "How did they know Theron was already moving, checking exits?" "They don't know. They're probably searching all your usual locations. Friends, family, home. This is just procedure. The back stairs will be too exposed. If they're doing this right, they'll have someone covering the rear." Theron scanned the apartment. "Is there another way out?" Lila's mind raced. Think. Think like an archivist. Map the space. "The attic. There's an access hatch. It connects to the apartment next door. Old building, shared attic space. Will the neighbors be home?" "Mrs. Chen works nights. She won't be back until 8. Footsteps on the exterior stairs. Heavy boots. At least 2 men. "Move," Theron ordered. Lila grabbed the telescope, her father's sextant, from the desk and a small box of photographs. Theron pulled a chair under the attic access and boosted her up. She pushed the hatch aside and pulled herself into the darkness. The attic was cramped, dusty, filled with the accumulated junk of decades. Lila crawled across the rafters, careful to distribute her weight. Behind her, Theron pulled himself up with surprising grace despite his damaged leg. A fist pounded on the apartment door below. "Lila Ashford, this is Blackwood Security. We need to confirm your welfare." They crawled in silence toward the next hatch. 20 feet, 15, 10. Below them, the sound of the door being forced open. Wood splintering, men entering. Clear the bedroom. Kitchen clear. Lila reached the second hatch and eased it open. Theron dropped through first landing in a crouch. He helped Lila down and they moved quickly to the apartment door. Unlocked. Mrs. Chen never locked her door, said it was safer that way, less damage if someone wanted in. They slipped out onto the second floor landing. The security team was still in Lila's apartment searching. Theron and Lila descended the stairs on the far side of the building, moving as quickly as silence allowed. They hit the tree line at a run, snow flying up around them. Behind them, shouts. The security team had realized Lila's apartment was abandoned. They'd search the building, find the attic access, figure out the escape route. But by then, Lila and Theron were already half a mile into the forest, moving fast through terrain the security team couldn't follow in their corporate SUVs. They didn't stop running until darkness forced them to slow down. Only then did Theron allow them to pause, both of them breathing hard, visible breath clouding in the frigid air. That was too close, Theron said, but we got it. Lila patted the hard drive in her pocket. 18 months of evidence. Everything we need. Everything we need to start, Theron corrected. But we still need more. We need to document the active operation, catch them in the act. Lila nodded. Her legs were shaking from exertion and adrenaline, but her mind was clear. Focused. Then we'd better get back to the cabin. Your people will be arriving soon, and we have 22 days to plan the most important operation of our lives. They walked through the darkness, navigating by starlight. Lila looked up at the constellations her father had taught her. Orion, Cassiopeia, Polaris, the constant star. Stars never lie, her father had said. They always tell the truth. It was time to make sure the truth was told so loudly no one could ignore it. Behind them in Caribou, the security team would report that Lila Ashford's apartment had been abandoned in a hurry. They'd find evidence of recent habitation. They'd wonder where she had gone. Let them wonder. Lila Ashford was done being invisible. The resistance had begun. They reached the cabin just as true darkness settled over the forest. The temperature had dropped again, plummeting to 20 below. Lila's lungs burned with each breath, ice crystals forming on her eyelashes. But the hard drive in her pocket felt warm, like it was generating its own heat. 18 months of evidence, proof that couldn't be denied. Smoke rose from the cabin's chimney. Someone had arrived. Theron raised a hand, signaling Lila to stop. He approached the door with the caution of a man who had survived too many ambushes. His hand moved to the weapon at his hip, fingers hovering over the grip. Then he relaxed. "It's Shepard," he said quietly. "I can smell his coffee. Man makes it strong enough to wake the dead." He pushed open the door. The man sitting at the small table was exactly what Lila expected from the description. 64 with steel gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime outdoors. He wore practical clothes, jeans, flannel shirt, heavy boots. Reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied one of Theron's maps. A medical bag sat on the floor beside his chair, the kind doctors used to carry on house calls before everything became sanitized and corporate. He looked up when they entered, and his eyes, sharp and assessing, went immediately to Lila. "So," he said, his voice carrying that cigarette rasp Lila had heard on the radio. "This is the one who's been sending you files for 18 months. Dr. Hayes Merrick," Theron made the introduction. "This is Lila Ashford." Hayes stood moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints protested the cold. He extended a hand. "Call me Hayes, and before we discuss anything else, I need to examine you. Theron said you went through rejection sickness and hypothermia. That's not something to take lightly." Lila shook his hand. His grip was dry, warm, professional. "I'm fine, really. Theron got me to warmth in time." "Humor an old veterinarian," Hayes said, already pulling equipment from his bag. "I've been patching up stubborn idiots for 40 years. You're not getting out of this." Despite herself, Lila smiled. There was something grandfatherly about Hayes, something that made her think of her father. The same quiet competence. The same way of looking at the world like it was a puzzle to be solved. She sat while Hayes checked her vitals. Blood pressure, temperature, pupil response. He listened to her lungs, had her track his finger with her eyes, checked her extremities for frostbite damage. "You're lucky," he said finally. "Another hour in that blizzard and we'd be having a very different conversation. Your core temperature is still a degree below normal, but you're recovering. The rejection sickness is the bigger concern." "It's manageable," Lila said. Hayes gave her a look over his reading glasses. "Rejection sickness isn't something you manage. It's a biological cascade. Your autonomic nervous system went into shock when the mate bond was severed. You'll experience temperature fluctuations, immune suppression, possibly cardiac arrhythmia for the next 2 weeks. Maybe longer." "I don't have time to be sick for 2 weeks." "Then you'd better not die," Hayes said bluntly, "because that's the alternative. I've seen wolves die from rejection sickness, especially omegas. The bond runs deeper in you, severs harder." Theron, who had been building up the fire, turned sharply. "I didn't know it was that serious." "Most people don't," Hayes said, "because most people don't survive it long enough to document the effects. The ones who do usually have pack support. Medical intervention, not a mad dash through a blizzard followed by breaking into their own apartment while running from security." He pulled out a bottle of pills and handed them to Lila. "These are beta blockers. They'll help stabilize your heart rate, Take one twice a day, and these another bottle are for immune support. Your body's going to be vulnerable for a while. Anything from a common cold to pneumonia could kill you right now. Lila took the bottles, feeling the weight of Hayes's concern. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't die. I didn't spend 10 years keeping this one alive. He jerked his thumb at Theron, just to watch you undo all my work by being reckless. The door opened again, bringing a blast of cold air, and a woman who moved like violence, barely contained. Sloane Winters was smaller than Lila expected, maybe 5'6", with a runner's build and short-cropped blonde hair. She wore tactical gear, cargo pants, heavy boots, a parka that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that stopped Lila. Gray, cold, the eyes of someone who had looked at too much death and decided to return the favor. Ghost, she said, nodding to Theron. Then her gaze swept to Lila and Hayes. Shepard, and you must be the archivist. Lila Ashford. Sloane studied her with the intensity of a predator assessing prey. You're the one who's been feeding ghost intel for 18 months. Yes. Good. Sloane dropped a duffel bag on the floor. It hit with a metallic thunk that suggested weapons. Lots of them. Then maybe we can finally stop watching these bastards operate and actually do something about it. She pulled off her parka, and Lila saw the tattoo on her inner forearm. A name. Maya. And beneath it, dates. Birth and death separated by only 23 years. Your sister, Lila said quietly. Sloane's jaw tightened. Ghost told you. He did. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be ready to fight. Sloane walked to the maps on the wall and studied them with professional focus. Ghost says you have a plan. Something about documenting an active operation. My sister is on the next transfer list, Lila said. 22 days from now, along with 22 other women. If we can document the entire chain, the abduction, the transport, the border crossing, we'll have evidence that can't be disputed. Sloane turned, and for the first time something other than anger flickered in her eyes. Something that might have been hope. You want to wire the entire operation. Video, audio, GPS tracking, everything. Make it impossible for them to claim it was consensual, impossible for any corrupt officials to bury it. That's ambitious, also insane. Sloane pulled out a chair and straddled it backward. I like it, but we'll need serious equipment, and we'll need to know the route they're taking. If we lose them between the estate and the border, the whole thing falls apart. I have the GPS logs, Lila said, pulling out the hard drive. 18 months of truck routes. I can predict their path with 90% accuracy. Sloane whistled low. 90%? You really are as good as Ghost said. Before Lila could respond, the radio crackled to life. Theron moved to answer it. Ghost Actual, this is K. Frost. I'm 2 miles out, but I've got a problem. Theron's posture shifted instantly to alert. What kind of problem? The kind with headlights. I think I picked up a tail coming out of Portland. Black SUV, Blackwood security plates. They're hanging back, but they're definitely following. Theron swore under his breath. Can you lose them? Not without making it obvious I'm running. If I spook them, they'll call it in, and we'll have every Blackwood asset in Maine converging on this location. Then don't spook them, Theron said. Lead them north. Make it look like you're heading for the Canadian border. We'll handle the rest. Copy that. K. Frost out. Theron turned to Sloane. You still have your state police credentials. They were revoked when I quit. But you still have the physical badge. Sloane smiled, and it was a dangerous expression. Never leave home without it. Good. Take my truck. Intercept K. Frost's tail about 5 miles north of here. There's a checkpoint near the Madawaska crossing. Flash the badge. Tell them you're running a training exercise. Confuse them long enough for Frost to get here. Sloane was already moving, grabbing her parka. Consider it done, but Ghost, we're running out of time to play it safe. Eventually they're going to put the pieces together. I know, Theron said grimly. That's why we move fast. 22 days to plan and execute the biggest operation of our lives. Sloane left without another word, the door slamming behind her. Hayes had been quiet during the exchange, but now he spoke up. You're building a team. We have to, Theron said. This isn't something 2 people can do alone. Not anymore. Then you'd better hope young Frost isn't compromised. Hayes started unpacking medical supplies, setting up a makeshift clinic area. Because if Blackwood knows he's coming here, they know about all of us. Lila moved to the window, watching the darkness. Somewhere out there, Kieran Frost was being followed. Somewhere behind him, Sloane Winters was preparing to intercept. And somewhere in the Blackwood estate, her sister Nessa was serving drinks to men who smiled with too many teeth, unaware that her name was on a transfer list that meant death. 22 days. Tell me about Frost, Lila said, not turning from the window. Can we trust him? Theron joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Kieran Frost is 26, worked IT for Blackwood for 3 years. Smart kid, brilliant with computers. He stumbled across the transfer files 2 years ago while doing routine server maintenance. Made the mistake of asking his supervisor about the discrepancies. Let me guess, they tried to silence him. Permanent transfer to a logging camp in Alaska, remote, isolated, no internet access. He would have disappeared into the wilderness and no one would have questioned it. Theron's voice was hard. He ran instead, showed up at one of my dead drops 6 months later. Scared, young, but determined to make them pay. Has he been reliable? For 2 years, yes. He's the one who's been decrypting their communications, breaking their encryption protocols. He's how I knew about the next shipment, about your sister. Lila absorbed this. So if he's compromised, then we abort. Get you and Nessa to Canada. Start over with whatever evidence we have. No, Lila's voice was firm. She turned to face him. We don't abort. 22 women Theron, 22 lives. I'm not leaving them behind just to save myself. Lila, my father died trying to expose these people. I've spent 18 months building a case. I'm not stopping now, not when we're this close. Theron studied her face and Lila saw something shift in his expression. Respect, understanding, maybe even admiration. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He nodded slowly. Then we see it through. Together. The word hung between them. Together. Not alpha and omega. Not rescuer and rescued. Partners. Equals. The radio crackled again. Ghost, this is Reaper. I've got visual on the tail. Pulling them over now. K. Frost should be clear to proceed. Copy that, Reaper. Good work. 15 minutes later, they heard the sound of an engine approaching. A beat-up Honda Civic, at least 15 years old, pulled up to the cabin. The driver's door opened, and a young man unfolded himself from the seat. Kieran Frost looked exactly like his voice suggested. Young, lean, nervous energy in every movement. He wore jeans and a hoodie under a thin jacket, not nearly warm enough for Maine winter. His dark hair was too long, falling into his eyes. He carried a laptop bag and a backpack that looked heavy enough to contain serious equipment. He practically ran to the cabin door, glancing over his shoulder like he expected pursuit. Theron opened the door before Frost could knock. You're clear. Reaper pulled them over 5 miles north. Frost sagged with visible relief. Thank God. I thought for sure I was blown. He stepped inside and immediately gravitated to the warmth of the stove. I've been driving around Portland for 3 hours trying to shake them. Finally had to risk the direct route. His eyes landed on Lila and widened. You're Archive Omega. Lila Ashford, she corrected. Holy shit. Frost dropped his bags and just stared at her. You're real. I mean, I knew you were real, but seeing you in person is... Wow, your encryption protocols are insane. I've been studying them for months. The way you layered the security, the rotating keys, the false data trails, it's brilliant. Despite the situation, Lila felt herself smile. You decrypted them. Eventually. Took me 6 weeks on the first one. But that's what convinced me Ghost wasn't crazy. Nobody goes to that much trouble to fake evidence. You were the real deal. We're still in, Lila said, and I have something you need to see. She pulled out the hard drive and handed it to Frost. He took it like it was made of gold and glass, handling it with reverent care. Is this 18 months of everything? Raw data, unfiltered. I need you to organize it. Create a searchable database. Cross-reference the files with what Theron already has. And I need you to find patterns I might have missed. Frost was already opening his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. I can do that. Give me 48 hours and I'll have everything indexed, cross-referenced, and analyzed. We'll be able to search by date, location, personnel, involved, vehicle, used, anything. Hayes had been watching this exchange with the quiet observation of a diagnostician. Now he spoke up. You're building a prosecution case. Yes, Lila confirmed, but not just for court, for the court of public opinion. We need evidence so overwhelming, so undeniable that even corrupt officials can't bury it. That's why you want to document the active operation, Hayes said, understanding dawning. You're not just gathering evidence, you're creating a narrative. Beginning to end. Crime to consequences. Exactly. Lila moved to the maps on the wall and pointed to the route she had identified. They take them from the estate here, drive north through Fort Kent, cross the border at St. Leonard. From there, the trail goes cold. But if we can document every step, the abduction, the transport, the border crossing, We can show exactly how the operation works. Sloan returned 20 minutes later, bringing another blast of cold air and snow. Tail is neutralized, gave them a story about anti-terrorism training exercises, checked their IDs, made them think they stumbled into federal business. They won't report it for fear of looking incompetent. She shrugged out of her parka and joined the group around the maps. But we bought ourselves maybe 24 hours. After that, someone's going to start asking questions about why Blackwood's security got pulled over by a cop who shouldn't have jurisdiction. 24 hours is enough, Theron said. He looked around the cabin at the assembled group. A veterinarian, an ex-cop, a hacker, an archivist, and himself the ghost who should have died 10 years ago. It wasn't an army, but it was a start. All right, he said. Here's what we know. 22 days from now, Blackwood is moving 23 women, including Lila's sister Nessa. The operation will follow their standard protocol late-night transfer from the estate transport in logging trucks, modified with hidden compartments, border crossing at an unmonitored point handoff to Sterling operatives on the Canadian side. He traced the route on the map. We need to document every step. That means surveillance equipment at multiple points, video cameras, audio recording devices, GPS trackers on the trucks, and we need witnesses, people who can testify that what they saw was real. That's a lot of equipment, Frost said, and a lot of money. I have money, Theron said. 10 years of living off-grid means 10 years of saving every penny. We can afford what we need. What about manpower? Sloan asked. 5 of us can't cover every point on this route. We'll need help. No more people, Theron said firmly. Every person we bring in is another potential leak. Another way this operation gets compromised. We work with what we have. Hayes cleared his throat. Then we better be smart about positioning, and we need a contingency plan for when things go wrong. When, not if, Sloan corrected. In my experience, operations like this always go sideways. We need to plan for failure. Lila listened to them discuss tactics, equipment, positioning. These were people who had lost things to Blackwood. Family, careers, years of their lives. And now they were committing to a fight that could get them all killed. Because it was the right thing to do. She thought about her father, about the night he died, the way he had tried to tell her something important. About the 8 years she had spent believing the official story because it was easier than accepting the truth. No more. I want to testify, she said, loud enough to cut through the tactical discussion. When this is over, when we have all the evidence, I want to be the one who presents it. Publicly. I want to look them in the eye and tell them they failed. Theron studied her. That makes you a target. Forever. Even if Blackwood goes down, even if we expose the whole network, there will be people who want you silenced. I know. You'll never be invisible again. Good, Lila said, and she meant it. I'm done being invisible. I'm done letting them erase people. My father, Maya Winters, the 47 women on those lists. They tried to make them all disappear. Someone needs to speak for them. Sloane's expression softened. Just a fraction. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both? That got a small smile. Yeah, it can. Frost had been typing frantically throughout the conversation. Now he looked up, his face pale in the glow of his laptop screen. I've been running preliminary analysis on the hard drive, cross-referencing with Ghost's data, and I found something. The room went quiet. The transfer scheduled for 22 days from now. Frost continued, it's not a regular shipment, it's something bigger. There are internal memos referring to it as final phase. Final phase of what? Hayes asked. Frost clicked through files, his hands shaking slightly. Of the merger. The Blackwood-Sterling merger isn't just about combining operations. It's about expanding the network. They're planning to double their capacity. Move 200 women over the next 6 months. And this shipment, the one 22 days from now, it's the proof of concept, the demonstration for their buyers. Buyers, Lila felt sick. What buyers? I don't have names yet. The files are heavily encrypted, but based on the financial transfers, we're talking about international operations. Europe, Asia. This isn't just a regional trafficking ring, it's global. The weight of that settled over the room like a shroud. Then we can't afford to fail, Theron said quietly. Because if we do, if they successfully execute this final phase, we're not just talking about 23 women. We're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands. Lila walked to the window and stared out at the darkness. The stars were bright tonight, crystalline in the cold air. She found Polaris, the North Star, constant, unchanging, the one her father had taught her to find first. Stars never lie, she whispered. Behind her, she heard Theron organizing the team, assigning tasks, setting timelines, building the operation that would either save her sister and 22 other women or get them all killed. 22 days. 3 weeks to plan the impossible. 3 weeks to gather evidence that would destroy an empire. 3 weeks to become the person her father had believed she could be. Lila turned back to the room, to this unlikely team of broken people fighting for justice. Then we'd better get started. Hayes pulled out a thermos of his infamous coffee and started pouring. Sloane began inventorying weapons. Frost dove into the data with the obsessive focus of someone who had found his purpose. And Theron stood by the maps planning routes and contingencies and backup plans, his scarred face set in lines of determination. They worked through the night, planning, preparing, building something that might actually work. Outside, the temperature dropped to 30 below, the kind of cold that killed, the kind of cold that preserved, the kind of cold that made everything crystalline and clear. 22 days until they changed everything, or died trying. Frost had been typing frantically throughout the conversation. Now he looked up, his face pale in the glow of his laptop screen. I've been running preliminary analysis on the hard drive, cross-referencing with Ghost's data, and I found something. The room went quiet. The transfer scheduled for 22 days from now, Frost continued. It's not a regular shipment. It's something bigger. There are internal memos referring to it as final phase. Final phase of what? Hayes asked. Frost clicked through files, his hands shaking slightly. Of the merger. The Blackwood-Sterling merger isn't just about combining operations. It's about expanding the network. They're planning to double their capacity. Move 200 women over the next 6 months. And this shipment, the one 22 days from now, it's the proof of concept, the demonstration for their buyers. Buyers? Lila felt sick. What buyers? I don't have names yet. The files are heavily encrypted. But based on the financial transfers, we're talking about international operations. Europe, Asia. This isn't just a regional trafficking ring. It's global. The weight of that settled over the room like a shroud. Then we can't afford to fail, Theron said quietly. Because if we do, if they successfully execute this final phase, we're not just talking about 23 women. We're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands. Frost's laptop chimed, a notification. His fingers flew across the keyboard and the color drained from his face. Oh no. Oh God, no. Theron was beside him in 2 strides. What is it? I set up automated monitoring on Blackwood's internal communications. Flagged keywords. Shipment. Transfer. Burlington. Frost's voice was shaking. There's traffic moving right now. Tonight. An encrypted directive sent 90 minutes ago. He turned the screen so everyone could see. The message was brief. Clinical priority alpha test transport approved. Subjects Hanson Claire 24F/Morrison, Beth 22. All departure in 2300 hours. Route standard protocol Delta 7. Destination staging facility Bravo. Lila's blood turned to ice. They're moving people tonight. 2 women, Sloane said, reading over Frost's shoulder. Test run before the big shipment. They're making sure the route is clean. We can't let this happen, Lila said. We can't just sit here knowing 2 women are being taken right now and do nothing. We don't have a choice, Theron said, but there was no conviction in his voice. We're not ready. We don't have equipment. We don't have a plan. We have GPS logs, Lila shot back. I can predict their route. We have Sloane's law enforcement credentials. We have weapons. She stood up, adrenaline burning through the exhaustion. We might not get another chance like this. A small shipment. 2 victims instead of 23. This is our test run too. Hayes cleared his throat. She's right. If we're going to pull off the big operation in 22 days, we need to know if our methods work. And we need to know now, not when the stakes are 47 lives. Theron looked at Lila, and she saw the war in his expression. The ghost who had spent 10 years being careful, being patient, watching women disappear because he wasn't ready. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it fast and we do it smart. We intercept, we extract the victims, and we let the operation continue. We can't spook them. Not yet. Agreed, Sloane said. She was already checking her weapon, the movements practiced and efficient. How long do we have? Frost checked the timestamp. Message was sent at 21:30 hours. It's 22:45 now. If they're departing at 2300 and following standard protocol, Delta 7 route, Leela interrupted. She was at the maps tracing the line with her finger. I've seen this route designation in the logs. They'll take Route 11 North switch to back roads near Fort Kent, then cross at the unmanned checkpoint near St. Leonard. How long is the drive? Theron asked. 3 hours to the border. But there's a rest stop they always use. 40 minutes north of here. Old logging staging area. They stop there to switch drivers check the cargo. Sloan was pulling on her tactical gear. That's where we hit them. Isolated location, minimal witnesses. We can use the police credentials to make it look official. I'll go with you, Theron said. No, Lila's voice was firm. You stay here. Your face is on a memorial plaque. If someone recognizes you, the whole operation blows up. Sloan can do this. Not alone she can't, Sloan said. I need backup. Then I'll go. Lila grabbed her parka. Absolutely not. Theron started, but Lila cut him off. I know these routes better than anyone. I've archived every stop, every checkpoint, every deviation. And I'm the only one here they don't have current photos of. I'm dead, remember? She met his eyes. You said we're partners. That means trusting me to do this. The silence stretched. Then Theron nodded once sharp. You take orders from Sloan. She has tactical command. And you carry this. He handed her the Glock. Radio check every 10 minutes. First sign of trouble, you abort. Understood. Hayes was already packing a medical kit. If these women have been drugged, they'll need immediate care. Standard protocol is Rohypnol or ketamine. I'm giving you naloxone and flumazenil. And take this, he handed Sloan a satellite phone programmed with my number. You get them out, you call me immediately. Frost pulled out a small device that looked like a USB drive. Tracker. If you can plant this on the truck without them noticing, I can monitor their movements for the next 72 hours. Magnetic mount. Just slap it under the rear bumper. 20 minutes later, Lila and Sloan were in Theron's truck, racing north on Route 11. The night was clear, temperature dropping toward 30 below. Stars blazed overhead so bright they cast shadows. Sloan drove with the focused intensity of someone who had done this before. Rules of engagement, she said. We pull them over using my badge. I do all the talking. You stay in the truck unless I signal you. If shooting starts, you drop and cover. Clear, clear. The goal is extraction, not confrontation. We get the women, we leave the driver alive but confused. Make him think it was a routine stop that went weird. By the time he reports it, we're ghosts. They reached the staging area with 8 minutes to spare. It was exactly as Lila remembered from the archived photos. A wide clearing surrounded by dense forest, gravel parking area, an abandoned equipment shed, windows broken and dark. Sloan positioned the truck across the access road, angled to block it but still look official. She put on the state police jacket, grabbed a flashlight. You stay here, engine running. If I'm not back in 10 minutes or if you hear gunshots, you drive straight back to the cabin. Sloan, 10 minutes, Lila, promise me. I promise. Sloan disappeared into the darkness, moving with the silent grace of a predator. Lila waited, hands gripping the steering wheel. The truck's heater hummed. Her breath came in shallow clouds. 7 minutes later, headlights appeared. A logging truck, mud splattered and anonymous. It slowed when it saw the truck blocking the road. Lila watched as Sloan approached, flashlight sweeping. She could see the driver's window roll down. Sloan's body language was perfect, authoritative, bored, just another cop on a routine stop. Then everything went wrong. The driver's door burst open. A man jumped out, raising a weapon. Sloan moved faster, her gun already drawn. The crack of a gunshot split the night. Lila's hand went to her own weapon. Stay in the truck. Sloan's orders. But through the windshield, she could see the driver on the ground, Sloan standing over him, and something else. And something. The truck's rear door opening from the inside. A second man emerged, silhouetted against the truck's interior lights. He had a shotgun. Lila didn't think. She opened the truck door and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The recoil shocked her, the sound deafening. She didn't know if she hit anything, but the second man dropped and rolled behind the truck. Lila, get down, Sloan's voice sharp with command. But Lila had seen something in that brief moment when the rear door opened. 2 figures slumped inside. The women, she ran. It was stupid and reckless and probably suicidal, but she ran toward the logging truck, keeping low. Sloan was shouting something, providing covering fire. Bullets sparked off metal. The second man was somewhere in the darkness, wounded or repositioning. Lila reached the rear door and hauled herself up. The compartment was cramped, cold. 2 women lay on makeshift pallets, unconscious but breathing. Young, early 20s. One had blonde hair matted with sweat. The other was dark-haired, still wearing what looked like a hospitality uniform. I've got them, Lila shouted. She grabbed the blonde woman, tried to lift her. Too heavy. She needed help. Sloan appeared beside her, breathing hard. Driver's down. Second shooter fled into the woods. We have maybe 3 minutes before backup arrives. Together, they carried the first woman to Theron's truck. Then the second. Hayes's medical kit was in the back seat. Lila found the naloxone and administered it the way Hayes had showed her intranasal spray. The dark-haired woman gasped, eyes fluttering. "You're safe," Lila whispered. "You're safe now." Sloan was already moving, planting Frost's tracker under the logging truck's bumper. She checked the driver, unconscious, but a live gunshot wound to the shoulder, and zip-tied his hands. They were back in the truck and moving in under 4 minutes. Sloan drove fast, but not recklessly, watching the mirrors. Behind them, the logging truck sat dark and abandoned, its cargo gone. "That was insane," Sloan said, but there was something like respect in her voice. "You don't follow orders worth a damn. You needed help." "Yeah, I did." Sloan glanced at her. "You ever shoot anyone before tonight?" "Never even held a gun until this morning." "Natural talent, then? Or dumb luck?" A pause. "Probably both." In the back seat, the dark-haired woman moaned. Her eyes opened, unfocused and terrified. What? Lila turned to look at her. "You're safe. We got you out. You're going to be okay." The woman's eyes focused on Lila's face. Recognition flickered. "I know you. You work at the estate. Archives. You know me. You're Nessa's friend. She has your picture in her room." The woman's voice was slurred but gaining strength. "I'm Claire Hansen, Nessa's roommate." The world tilted. "You know Nessa? She's been looking for you ever since the gala. They said you died in the blizzard, but Nessa didn't believe it. She said if you were dead, she would know." Claire tried to sit up, fell back. "She told me if anything happened, if I couldn't find her, to find you. She said you were the only one who could stop them." "What are you talking about? What happened to Nessa?" "She knows," Claire whispered, "about the transfers. The women. She figured it out weeks ago. She's been gathering evidence, taking photos, stealing files. She's trying to do what you did." Lila felt ice settle in her stomach. "When did you last see her?" "This morning. She gave me something. Made me promise to hide it." Claire fumbled with her uniform, pulled out a folded piece of paper from an inner pocket. "She said if they took me, this would prove everything." Lila unfolded the paper. It was a photograph, security camera footage printed out. Time-stamped 3 days ago. It showed the estate's loading dock at night, a truck with its rear door open, and standing next to it, supervising the loading of an unconscious woman, was someone Lila recognized. Not Rowan, not Margot, not even Sterling operatives. FBI agent Camille Duran. The one person Theron had thought they might be able to trust. The head of the human trafficking task force. "Oh, God," Lila breathed. Sloan glanced at the photo and swore. "We're deeper in than we thought." They reached the cabin at 1:30 hours. Theron met them at the door, his face tight with controlled fury and relief. "You're alive." "Barely," Sloan said, "but we got them. Both women, and something else." Lila showed him the photograph, watched his face go hard. "Durand," he said quietly. "She's been on the task force for 8 years, right when this operation expanded." Hayes was examining the women, checking vitals, administering fluids. The blonde Beth Morrison was still unconscious. Claire was sitting up now, drinking water with shaking hands. Frost had his laptop open, tracking the logging truck's signal. "Driver's on the move. He's heading back toward the estate, slowly, probably calling in the incident right now." "They'll know someone intercepted the shipment," Theron said. "They'll accelerate the timeline." "There's more," Claire said. Her voice was stronger now, the drugs wearing off. "Nessa found out when they're moving the big group. She overheard Margot Blackwood on the phone. They're not waiting 22 days. When Lila asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. 48 hours. They moved it up. Something about the merger signing happening early. They want to demonstrate capacity before the contracts are finalized. Claire looked at Lila with desperate eyes. "And Nessa's on the list." She showed suspicious behavior. Started asking questions. "They're taking her in the first transport." The room went silent. 48 hours. 2 days instead of 22. Theron walked to the window, shoulders tight. "We can't pull off a full operation in 48 hours. It's impossible." "Then we don't do a full operation," Lila said. Her mind was racing, archivist instincts, building a plan from fragments. "We do exactly what we did tonight. Small team, surgical strike. We know the route. We know the staging area. We intercept, we extract, and we get every woman to safety." "And the evidence," Hayes asked. "Without documentation, we can't prove anything. It's our word against theirs. We have Frost's tracker on that truck. When they move the women in 48 hours, we'll track them in real time. We'll have GPS data showing the entire route. Lila pulled out her phone. And I'll be inside. Absolutely not, Theron said. I'm already dead. They think I froze in a blizzard. But Nessa knows I'm alive. If I can get a message to her, if I can coordinate from inside, we'll know exactly when and where they're moving everyone. You can't go back there, Theron said, and there was something raw in his voice. If they recognize you, they won't. I'll go in through the service entrance. The archives are in the basement. I can access the system plant surveillance equipment and get out before anyone knows I was there. It's suicide. It's our only option. Lila met his eyes. You spent 10 years documenting crimes you couldn't stop. I spent 18 months gathering evidence I couldn't use. We finally have a chance to save actual lives. 48 hours from now, 23 women disappear forever, including my sister. She looked around the room, at Sloane, whose sister had died alone in a ravine, at Hayes, who had spent a decade keeping one broken man alive, at Frost, who had run rather than become complicit, at Claire, still shaking from drugs and terror. We move tomorrow night, Lila said. Ready or not. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, cold and constant. Polaris blazed at true north, unwavering. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Stars never lie, Lila. They always tell the truth. In 48 hours, the whole world would know the truth, or they would all die trying. The estate looked different in daylight, less imposing, more exposed. Lila watched from the tree line as service vehicles came and went through the rear entrance. Delivery trucks, catering vans, the mundane machinery of a corporation that trafficked human beings. Last chance to back out, Theron said beside her. His voice was low, tense. Not backing out. Lila checked her watch. 0900 hours, 36 hours until the shipment moved. The morning shift change happens in 5 minutes. That's my window. She wore a cleaning service uniform Hayes had procured from God knows where. Hair pulled back, minimal makeup, AID badge with a photo that looked enough like her to pass casual inspection. In her bag, surveillance equipment, a tablet linked to Frost's network, and the Glock. Radio check every 30 minutes, Theron said. You miss one check-in, I'm coming in after you. If I miss a check-in, I'm already dead. Don't waste the team. Lila met his eyes. Get the women to safety. That's the mission. You're a part of the mission. I'm expendable. 23 lives aren't. She touched his scarred hand briefly. Trust me to do this. She moved before he could argue, crossing the service road with the confident stride of someone who belonged. The rear entrance was controlled by keycard. She used the cloned access Frost had programmed, holding her breath. The light turned green. Inside the estate was a hive of activity, staff preparing for some corporate event. She kept her head down, pushing a cleaning cart she'd grabbed from the supply closet. The archives were 3 floors down. She took the service elevator alone. The basement was quieter, cooler. The archives occupied the entire east wing, row after row of filing cabinets and digital terminals. Lila's old workspace sat untouched, a thin layer of dust on the keyboard. They hadn't replaced her yet. She booted up the terminal using her old credentials. Surprisingly, they still worked. Either incompetence or they assumed a dead woman couldn't log in. She accessed the security system first, creating blind spots in the camera coverage. 30-second loops. Frost had taught her the technique. Then she planted the surveillance devices. Tiny cameras disguised as electrical outlets. Audio bugs in the ventilation grates. GPS trackers ready to be attached to the transport vehicles. She was placing the last camera when she heard footsteps. Lila dove behind a filing cabinet, hard hammering. The footsteps came closer. Stopped. I know you're here. Nessa's voice. Familiar, achingly familiar. Lila emerged slowly, hands visible. Her sister stood 10 feet away, thinner than Lila remembered, dark circles under her eyes. But alive. Whole. Lila, Nessa's voice broke. Claire said you were alive, but I didn't. Shh. Lila crossed to her, pulled her into a fierce hug. We don't have time. Are you wired? Are they listening? No. I swept myself this morning. They suspect me, but they haven't moved yet. Nessa pulled back. You shouldn't have come back. It's too dangerous. They're moving you tomorrow night, along with 22 other women. I'm getting you out. I know when they're moving us. I've been tracking it. Nessa pulled out a folded paper. Complete manifest. Names times vehicle assignments. I was going to slip it to Claire, but then they took her. We got her out. She's safe. Relief flooded Nessa's face. Thank God. Beth, too. Both of them, and tomorrow night we're getting everyone else. Lila took the manifest, scanned it. 23 names. Nessa's was third on the list. This is everything we need. There's more. Nessa pulled out her phone, showed Lila photos. Duran comes here. FBI agent Camille Duran. She's been coordinating with Margot Blackwood for months. I have pictures of her taking payments, discussing routes. She's not just corrupt. She's running the whole operation from the federal side. Lila's blood ran cold. We suspected but didn't have proof. There's your proof. Nessa transferred the files. Lila, you need to know something else. Rowan doesn't know. About the trafficking, he thinks it's just money laundering and timber fraud. His mother and Duran kept him in the dark. That doesn't make him innocent. No, but it makes him an idiot who sold his soul for the wrong reasons. Nessa gripped her arm. Be careful tomorrow night. Margot knows someone's been digging. She's hired private security, ex-military. They'll shoot first. Footsteps above them. Multiple people. You need to go, Nessa whispered. Service tunnel, behind the 1987 records. It comes out near the loading dock. Come with me now. I can't. If I disappear, they'll move everyone up immediately. Scatter them. We'll lose the whole group. Nessa pushed her toward the tunnel entrance. Tomorrow night, I'll be ready. Nessa, I've been preparing for this for weeks. I know what I'm doing. Her sister smiled, and it was brave and terrified. I learned from the best archivist in Maine. Lila squeezed her hand once, then ran. The service tunnel was exactly where Nessa said. Narrow, dark, smelling of mold and rust. Lila crawled through, emerged behind a dumpster near the loading dock. She stripped off the cleaning uniform, stuffed it in the dumpster, and walked away in the jeans and jacket she'd worn underneath. Theron picked her up 3 blocks away. You're late, he said. Got what we needed. Lila handed him the manifest and Nessa's phone. And more than we hoped for. Back at the cabin, the team assembled. Frost analyzed the manifest, cross-referencing with his GPS data. Hayes prepared medical supplies for 23 women. Sloan cleaned weapons with the focus of someone preparing for war. Here's the plan, Lila said, spreading out the documents. They're using 4 vehicles, 3 logging trucks and 1 passenger van. The trucks carry 5 women each. The van carries 8 plus Nessa. They depart at 0200 hours, staggered by 15 minutes. Convoy formation, Sloan observed. Professional. Margot hired ex-military security, minimum 8 armed guards. Lila pointed to the road. They'll take Route 11 north, but Nessa got us something better. The manifest includes the exact staging points where they switch drivers. We hit them at the first staging point, Theron said, before they reach the border, before they are expecting trouble. We'll need to neutralize the guards without killing if possible, Hayes said. Legal implications. Fuck legal implications, Sloan said flatly. These are human traffickers, but tranq darts might be smarter. Harder to claim self-defense if we're using lethal force preemptively. Frost had been typing furiously. He looked up, face pale. I found Duran's financial records. She's been taking $50,000 per shipment for 8 years. That's nearly $5 million. That's our leverage, Lila said. We rescue the women tomorrow night. Then we hand everything to the one FBI agent I know is clean, Special Agent Marcus Webb. He's based in Boston outside Duran's sphere of influence. How do you know he's clean? Theron asked. Because 3 years ago he tried to investigate Blackwood Timber for labor violations. Duran shut him down. He's been trying to build a case ever since. Lila pulled up his contact information. I'm betting he'd love documented proof that his boss is a criminal. They worked through the night, planning, positioning, preparing for every contingency. At 0130 hours they moved out. The staging area was 30 miles north of the estate, an abandoned rest stop that hadn't seen legitimate traffic in years. Theron positioned the team in a perimeter around the location, Sloan on the north ridge with a tranquilizer rifle, Hayes in a van with medical supplies ready to move, Frost in the truck with electronic countermeasures, and Theron and Lila waiting in the darkness near the access road. At 0217 hours, the first logging truck arrived. Lila watched through night vision goggles as 2 guards emerged. They swept the area professionally, then signaled all clear. The truck's rear door opened. Women were let out, stumbling, drugged. Not yet, Theron whispered. Wait for the full convoy. At 0232, the second truck arrived. Then the third at 0245. Finally, at 0301, the passenger van. Nessa was in that van. Now, Theron said. Sloan fired first. 3 tranq darts, 3 guards down in seconds. Frost triggered an EMP pulse that killed the truck's engines and radios. Theron and Lila moved in with flashbangs and smoke. The guards reacted fast, but they were expecting police, not a coordinated assault. Sloan picked off two more. Theron tackled a guard who reached for his weapon. Lila dove for the van, yanked the door open. Nessa was inside, hands zip-tied, eyes wide. Lila, got you. Lila cut her bonds, helped her out. The other women in the van were terrified, drugged, confused. Gunfire erupted. One of the guards had body armor, shrugged off the tranq dart. He opened fire with an automatic rifle. Bullets tore through the smoke. Get them to Hayes, Theron shouted. He returned fire, drove the guard back behind a truck. Lila and Nessa herded the women toward Hayes' van. Sloan provided cover fire. More women emerged from the logging truck, some running, some too drugged to move. Then Lila saw her, Margot Blackwood, emerging from a fourth vehicle that hadn't been on the manifest. She had a briefcase handcuffed to her wrist and a pistol in her other hand. Stop, Margot's voice carried across the chaos. Everyone stop or I start executing hostages. She grabbed the nearest woman, pressed the gun to her head. The shooting stopped. You boho, Margot said, staring at Lila. You're supposed to be dead. Disappointed, Lila kept her own weapon trained on Margot. Who are you working with, FBI and Sterling's competitors? Margot's eyes darted around, calculating. Doesn't matter. You let me walk away with this case or she dies. That case is evidence, Lila said. Financial records, client lists, everything we need to destroy your network. Exactly. And it's worth more than all these women combined. Margot cocked the hammer. I walk or she dies. Your choice. Theron was circling, trying to get a clean shot, but Margot was using the woman as a shield perfectly. Lila, Nessa whispered beside her, in her briefcase, left side pocket. Emergency beacon. If she activates it, Sterling's backup team will be here in 10 minutes. How do you know? I packed that briefcase yesterday. Nessa's smile was grim, and I removed the battery from the beacon. Lila lowered her weapon. You're right. She's not worth it. Walk. Margot laughed, shoved the woman away, and ran for her vehicle. She jumped in, started the engine, activated the emergency beacon in the briefcase. Nothing happened. Her face went white as she realized. She threw the car in reverse, but Frost had already punctured the tires with a remote spike strip. The car lurched, died. Sloan put a tranq dart in Margot's neck. The Luna of the Blackwood pack collapsed across the steering wheel. Lila ran to the woman Margot had threatened, checked her, shaken but unharmed. All around, the women were being loaded into Hayes' van and the captured vehicles. 23 in total, all accounted for. Status, Theron demanded over the radio. All hostages secure, Hayes reported. 8 guards down, all unconscious, Sloan confirmed. Margot Blackwood in custody, Lila added. Evidence intact. Theron allowed himself a small smile. Then we're done here. Move out. They were 10 miles south when the police finally arrived at the staging area, responding to reports of gunfire. By then, the team was ghosts again. Special Agent Marcus Webb arrived at the safe house at 0600 hours with a full tactical team. Lila met him at the door, handed him Margot's briefcase and 3 encrypted hard drives. Everything you need to dismantle the largest trafficking network in the Northeast, she said. Financial records, client lists, video evidence, witness testimony from 23 rescued women, and proof that your boss, Agent Camille Duran, has been running the operation. Webb opened the briefcase, paled as he saw the contents. Jesus Christ. The women need medical attention and protection. Margot Blackwood and 8 armed guards are sedated in the barn, and you have about 2 hours before the media shows up because I sent everything to the Boston Globe, the New York Times, and CNN. Webb stared at her. You leaked it. I documented it, Lila corrected. Now you get to be the agent who solved it. 48 hours later, the world watched as Margot Blackwood, Valentina Sterling, and FBI agent Camille Duran were arraigned in federal court. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage of the rescue, GPS data showing years of border crossings, financial records detailing millions in trafficking revenue. Rowan Blackwood cooperated with investigators claiming ignorance. They charged him with money laundering and corporate fraud anyway. He received 15 years. Margot and Duran each received life without parole. Valentina Sterling died by suicide in her cell before trial. The network collapsed in 6 weeks. 83 people arrested across 4 states and 2 countries. 6 months later, Lila stood at the podium in the newly renamed Nathan Ashford Memorial Observatory. 200 people filled the auditorium, rescued women, law enforcement, journalists, survivors. My father taught me that stars never lie, she said into the microphone. He died because he told the truth about powerful people. But the truth survived him, and it survives them. She looked out at the audience. Nessa sat in the front row, healthy now, working as a victim advocate. Claire Hansen beside her. Beth Morrison. All 23 rescued women were there. Hayes Merrick sat with his medical colleagues. Sloan Winters wore her state police uniform, again reinstated with honors. Kieran Frost had a job offer from the FBI's Cyber Crimes Division. And Theron stood at the back, as always, scarred face catching the light. Electric blue eye watching her with something that might have been pride. We're opening the Ashford Foundation tomorrow, Lila continued, a safe house and advocacy center for trafficking survivors, funded by the seized assets of the Blackwood Sterling Network, because their blood money is going to save lives now. The applause was thunderous. After on the observatory deck, Lila found Theron looking up at the stars. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. She stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Together. What's next for you, Archive Omega? Lila smiled. There are 47 other women still missing, from before we started tracking. Their families deserve closure. I'm going to find them. That could take years. Then I'd better get started. She looked up at Polaris, bright and constant. Someone has to remember them. Someone has to tell their stories. Theron nodded slowly. You're going to need help. Are you volunteering as partners, he said, equals. She took his scarred hand in hers. The touch was warm, solid, real. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance. Constant, unwavering. True, Lila thought of her father, of the 23 women sleeping safely tonight, of the empty chair at Rowan Blackwood's empire now dismantled brick by brick. Justice wasn't swift. It wasn't easy, but it was inevitable. Like the stars, always telling the truth, always showing the way home.